the smile that started the fire. They would later say the scandal began with a kiss, but that is a lie. It began long before lips ever touched. On a night when the sea clawed at the shore and the old manor on the cliff still belonged to a family that pretended it was whole. The chandelier flickered, the violins strained, and every guest in that glittering ballroom felt, without knowing why, that something in the air had already cracked. A woman in a crimson dress stood at the top of the marble staircase, watching the man who called himself her husband slip through a side door with her closest friend. She did not scream. She smiled. It was that smile that would ruin them all. Her name was Alara Moreau, heiress, philanthropist, whispered about beauty, and the world believed she had everything. But those who knew her well, or thought they did, understood that Alara collected secrets the way others collected jewelry. She wore them close to her skin, warm and sharp, waiting for the moment they would draw blood. And now, watching the man she had married for love disappear into shadows with the woman she had trusted like a sister, she felt something inside her shift. Not break. Harden. Downstairs, unaware of her gaze, Adrien Moreau spoke in frantic whispers as he pushed open the conservatory door. "Just a moment," he urged, his voice trembling, not with fear but desire. "No one will notice." But someone always notices. From behind a column draped in orchids stood Lucien Armand, Adrien's oldest friend, Alara's once lover, and the man who understood better than either of them what was truly at stake. His hands curled around his glass until it cracked, droplets of red wine running over his fingers like blood. He knew this was not simply infidelity, it was a declaration of war, and he had been waiting years for the first shot. The music swelled, the doors closed, and the storm outside found its echo within. By the end of the night, one reputation would be destroyed, one heart shattered beyond repair, and one life forever changed. Years later, when journalists and biographers tried to trace the origins of the infamous Moreau scandal, the betrayals, the trials, the disappearance, they would return again and again to this moment. The moment when Alara Moreau smiled. The orchestra slid into a darker melody, violins tightening like nerves, while chandeliers trembled with the force of the storm hammering the cliffs. Guests laughed too loudly, drank too quickly, sensing drama without yet seeing the shape of it. Human instinct always leans toward the scent of ruin. Alara descended the staircase with the grace of a queen walking to her coronation, though every step felt like she was walking deeper into a cavern she herself had carved. Silk whispered around her legs. Diamonds burned cold against her throat. She looked every bit the adored wife, the admired hostess. But her eyes were searching. She knew precisely where Adrien had gone. They had designed the manor together, back when love had been something bright and foolish, and the conservatory had been his dream. A sanctuary of glass where he could grow rare orchids and pretend the world could be controlled with enough beauty. How ironic that beauty would be the thing to undo him. At the edge of the ballroom, Lucien intercepted her. His voice was low, intimate, as if they were alone. "You should not follow them." Alara paused, turning her head slightly, catching his reflection in the gilded mirror beside them. His dark hair was damp from the rain, his jaw clenched, eyes too knowing. Once that gaze had set her heart alight. Now it merely reminded her of the price of choosing wrong. "Should," she murmured. "Lucien, you forget. You taught me that word means nothing in this house." He flinched, and she took a quiet satisfaction in it. "Let me handle this." He tried again, stepping closer. "Adrien is reckless, but she, Alara cut in, her smile sharpening, has made a very brave mistake." Lucien studied her face. "You're not going to confront them?" "No," her voice softened, becoming something far more dangerous. "Confrontation would give them dignity." She swept past him, not toward the conservatory, but toward the balcony doors. If she stormed in now, if she screamed, slapped, shattered, everyone would remember her as the wounded wife. That narrative did not interest her. She would write a different one. Inside the conservatory, hidden by vines and glass fogged with heat and breath, Adrien pressed his lips desperately to Isabelle's neck. She gasped, her hands tangled in his hair. "It isn't wrong," she whispered, though her voice trembled with the knowledge that it absolutely was. "You said you were unhappy." "I am," Adrien breathed. "She doesn't love me anymore." Outside, lightning split the sky. From the balcony above, unseen, Alara watched through the rain-blurred glass. She had known, of course. The late meetings, the whispered messages, the sudden interest in philanthropy projects, she herself had never approved. But witnessing it, seeing his mouth against Isabel's skin, the same mouth that had once promised forever, set something inside her ablaze. Not sorrow, not jealousy, purpose. Back in the ballroom, Lucien drained his glass and made a decision that would alter the course of all their lives. If Adrien wanted to destroy himself, fine. But Lucien would not allow Alara to go down with him. Not again. He set the shattered stemware aside and walked toward the conservatory, each step heavy with the weight of old love and older guilt. The storm roared, the doors swung open, and the first scream of the night split the air. But it was not Alara's. It was Isabel's. The scream cut through music and laughter like a blade, silencing the ballroom in an instant. Guests froze mid-step, mid-sip, their expressions shifting from idle curiosity to hungry alarm. Scandal was delightful in the abstract, but a scream promised something far richer. Alara did not move. She stood on the balcony, fingers resting lightly on the railing, rain clinging to her lashes. Inside, servants rushed toward the conservatory, skirts swishing, shoes slipping. Gasps rippled outward like waves. She waited. There is power in being the last to react. Inside the conservatory, humidity pressed thick against the air, leaves dripping, orchids trembling from the disturbance. Isabel stumbled backward, clutching her hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Adrien spun around, breathless and flushed, ready to scold her for making noise, until he saw what she had seen. Lucien stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, chest rising and falling as if he had run the entire length of the manor. His expression was not furious. It was stricken. And in his hand, glinting beneath the glass roof's lightning flashes, was a torn scrap of crimson silk, the exact shade of Alara's gown. Adrien's face drained of color. Lucien, what? Lucien threw the scrap at him. It fluttered like a dying bird before landing across Adrien's shoes. You fool, Lucien hissed. You think this is about sex? About boredom? His voice cracked, raw and unrestrained, exposing the depth he usually masked behind charm. You don't understand what you've set in motion. Isabel pressed herself against the glass wall, shivering. Someone was in here, she whispered. Watching us. Adrien spun toward her. No one followed. Not someone, Lucien interrupted. Her. On the balcony, Alara finally turned away from the window. She had not torn her dress. She had left that fragment deliberately days ago, hidden behind a row of orchids. A tiny, elegant marker. A breadcrumb meant for only one man to find. Lucien. Because Lucien was the only one who would notice something so small, the only one who understood the language she spoke when she set a trap. And tonight, she needed him to realize one thing. She was not the victim. She was the author. Back below, Adrien grabbed Lucien's arm. What are you talking about? Alara wouldn't. Lucien's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. She has known about you and Isabel for months. She's been planning, calculating. She invited half the city tonight, not to celebrate but to witness. Adrien stared at him, disbelief warring with dread. No, he insisted. No, she still loves me. Isabel laughed, a brittle panic sound. Men always believe that. And then the conservatory doors slammed open again, revealing the butler's pale, trembling face. Sir, Madame Moreau, he swallowed hard. Her safe has been opened, and something is missing. Lucien closed his eyes. Of course, the letters. The ones that could destroy not only Adrien's reputation, but the entire Moreau family legacy. Documents detailing affairs, bribes, political manipulations, the kind of secrets that turn scandals into catastrophes. Where is she? Adrien demanded, panic finally breaking his voice. The butler hesitated. She asked me to deliver a message. Everyone leaned in, breath caught. She said. The butler recited, voice shaking. Tell my husband the evening has only just begun. Up on the balcony, Alara stepped back into the ballroom, rainwater gleaming on her shoulders like jewels. Every eye turned toward her. She smiled again, slow, serene, devastating. But this time, everyone understood the truth. This was not the smile of a woman betrayed. It was the smile of a woman who had just begun her revenge. The moment Alara re-entered the ballroom, the atmosphere changed. Moments ago, Guests had been giddy with curiosity, leaning toward the conservatory like moths toward flame. Now they looked at her as though she were the flame itself, beautiful, dangerous, capable of burning the entire house down. She let their stares wash over her, savoring the silence she commanded without raising her voice or lifting a hand. A string snapped in a violinist's trembling fingers. Someone whispered, "God help Adrian." Someone else whispered, "God help all of them." Lucien burst into the ballroom, breath ragged, rain running down his face. He scanned the crowd until his gaze collided with hers. For a heartbeat, time held. Once he had known every secret behind that smile. Once she had chosen him and then chosen Adrian instead. He had spent years punishing himself for losing her, believing he had not fought hard enough. But looking at her now, radiant and terrifying, he realized the truth. No one owned Alara Moreau. Not then. Not now. Maybe not ever. He stepped toward her, ready to drag her somewhere private, to demand she stop this before it became irreversible. But Alara raised a single finger. Wait. He froze. Servants rushed in behind him, faces pale. The storm outside reached a fever pitch, shaking the windows. Lightning strobed over Alara, illuminating her like an apparition. Then the musicians, trained to follow her cues as hostess, struck up a new piece. A waltz. Slow. Haunting. Deliberate. Alara extended her hand toward the center of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice silken and steady, "what is a celebration without a dance?" A ripple of disbelief passed through the crowd. Adrian stumbled in from the conservatory, Isabel trailing behind him like a broken shadow. He looked wild, desperate, terrified in a way that only a man who realizes his power is slipping away can be. "Alara," he gasped. "We need to talk." She tilted her head. "We will. But first, our guests deserve a performance." He grabbed her wrist, fingers digging in. "Alara, please. The letters." Her smile never wavered. "Which ones, darling?" she asked loudly enough for those closest to hear. "Yours? Your father's? Or perhaps Isabel's?" Gasps erupted. Isabel let out a strangled sound. Lucien swore under his breath. This was no simple revenge. This was detonation. Alara leaned closer to Adrian, her lips brushing his ear, her voice a whisper meant only for him. "You should never have involved her," she murmured. "I could have forgiven your boredom, but not your cowardice." Adrian recoiled as if struck. "Dance with me," she said, stepping into the waltz. He refused. She turned away from him without hesitation. "Lucien." His name slipped from her tongue like a command. He hesitated only a moment before stepping forward, taking her hand. The touch seared through both of them. Memory, desire, regret. Everything they thought buried roaring back to life. The room held its breath. The fallen husband stood abandoned. The former lover took his place. And Alara began to dance. The waltz unfolded in perfect, cruel poise. Every spin, every glide, every brush of her hand against Lucien's shoulder was a statement. She was reclaiming the narrative, rewriting roles before witnesses who would spread the story like wildfire through salons and newspapers by morning. Adrian watched, trembling with fury and fear. Isabel watched, trembling with something worse, realization. Because she suddenly understood. Alara had not merely discovered the affair. She had orchestrated it. The late-night charity projects, the philanthropic committees, the situations that placed Isabel and Adrian together with intoxicating frequency. Had they been opportunities? Or bait? Lucien leaned in, voice low. "Alara, what have you taken?" Her eyes glittered. "Only what was already mine. And what will you do with it?" She smiled with exquisite calm. "Give the world a tragedy worth remembering." Then, as the waltz reached its climax, the grand doors at the far end of the ballroom slammed open. A uniformed officer stood in the doorway, rain pouring behind him. "Madame Moreau," he announced, voice echoing through the hall. "We have a warrant." The room erupted. Adrian staggered backward. Lucien tightened his grip on her hand. Alara simply lifted her chin, serene. Of course they had come. She had sent the invitation. Gasps ricocheted off marble and crystal as the officer stepped fully into the ballroom, water pooling beneath his boots. Behind him, more uniformed men appeared, hats dripping, expressions grim and bewildered. They had expected chaos, perhaps resistance, but not a glittering waltz led by the very woman they had come to arrest. The music faltered, then died. Alara released Lucien's hand with a graceful final turn, ending the dance as though this interruption had been choreographed. Her gown fanned around her like a crimson tide settling after a wave. "What a dramatic entrance," she murmured. The officer swallowed. He had practiced this moment, the authoritative tone, the formal procedure, but none of his training prepared him for Alara Moreau smiling at him like a hostess greeting a late guest. "Madame Moreau," he repeated louder, "we have a warrant to search the premises for stolen documents relating to political bribery, financial fraud, and," he hesitated, "and blackmail." A chorus of shocked whispers rippled through the crowd. Adrian pushed forward, voice cracking. "This is absurd, Alara would never." But the officer raised a hand. "The warrant was issued following an official complaint," he said. Alara arched a brow. "From whom?" The officer opened the folder. "From your husband." Silence. Every head turned toward Adrian. His face drained. I didn't." Alara laughed softly. Not cruelly, no worse. Pityingly. "Oh, Adrian," she said. "You signed what you didn't read. As always." He blinked in confusion, then horror dawned. The charity paperwork. The urgent documents his father's lawyers had begged him to authorize. The signatures he had scribbled without question. Lucien's eyes widened. "Alara, you didn't." She did not look at him. "I created a foundation," she said lightly. "And in its bylaws your husband, dear Adrian, declared himself the principal whistleblower of the Moreau family's misconduct." The room erupted into frantic whispering. Isabel's knees buckled. She grabbed a table for support. "You framed me," Adrian choked. "You framed all of us." Alara's gaze sharpened. "No. I revealed you." The officer cleared his throat, uncertain whether he was witnessing a confession or a performance. "We are also instructed," he said, shifting uneasily, "to take Madame Moreau into custody for questioning." Lucien stepped in front of her instantly, body tense, voice low and dangerous. "No. You will not touch her." The officers tensed. Alara laid a hand on Lucien's arm. "Stand down." He turned to her, eyes burning. "They'll destroy you." She met his gaze, and for the first time that night, something flickered behind her composure. Not fear. Resolve. "They cannot destroy what I have already set ablaze," she whispered. He understood. This was not the end of her plan. It was the ignition. Adrian lunged toward her, desperation finally shredding his dignity. "If you walk out with them," he hissed, "everything collapses. The family, the estate, your name. You'll ruin yourself." Alara looked at him with gentle, devastating clarity. "I lost my name the day I married you." He recoiled. She continued, voice soft but carrying through the hall. "You took my love. You took my loyalty. Now I take what truly matters to you." Her eyes drifted to the guests, powerful families, politicians, journalists, all witnessing the downfall of the Moreau dynasty. "Legacy." The officer approached cautiously. "Madame Moreau, please." Alara extended her wrists, but not in surrender. In offering. The gesture was so poised, so deliberate, that several guests gasped as though witnessing a coronation instead of an arrest. "Escort me," she said. "And do be careful with the gown. It's worth more than your salary." A nervous officer hesitated before placing cuffs on her wrists. Cold metal clicked shut. Lucien flinched as though the sound struck bone. Adrian swayed. Isabel sobbed silently. As they led Alara toward the doors, she paused beside her husband. Without looking at him, she murmured, "You should read tomorrow's papers, darling. I made sure they have everything." Adrian's breath stuttered. "What everything?" Her smile returned, slow, lethal. "Your father's offshore accounts. Isabel's letters. Your own debts. And," she added lightly, "the witness statements." "Witness?" She leaned in. "I never needed to confront you. I needed the world to." The officers pulled her forward. The storm swallowed them as the doors closed. For a heartbeat, the ballroom remained suspended in stunned silence. Then Lucien exhaled, long, ragged, and whispered the words that everyone else was too afraid to voice. She wanted to be arrested. Adrian turned to him, face ghost white. Why? Lucien's gaze shifted toward the balcony, then the conservatory, then the stunned crowd. And he understood. She's removing herself from the board, he said slowly. So we can destroy each other. Realization hit Adrian like a blow. Alara hadn't just lit the match. She had locked all of them in the room with the fire. Outside, thunder cracked. And somewhere beyond the manor walls, unseen by all of them, a carriage moved through the rain, carrying a trunk that did not belong to Alara. Inside it lay the one thing no one knew she had taken. The only thing that could rewrite everything. Her insurance. Her escape. Her truth. The carriage wheels hissed over wet cobblestones, lanterns swaying, rain streaking the glass like claw marks. The driver kept his head low beneath his soaked cap, urging the horses onward with silent urgency. He had been paid in advance, handsomely, and instructed not to stop for anyone, especially not the police, especially not the Moreaus. Inside the trunk, beneath layers of silk shawls and decoy papers, wrapped in oilcloth and string, lay a leather-bound ledger whose existence had been denied under oath for more than 20 years. Not letters. Not gossip. Records. Names, dates, payments, proof of the political machinery that had built the Moreau Empire and corrupted half the city in the process. And on its final page, written in a careful looping hand, "If I disappear, release this." Signed, Alara Moreau. Back in the ballroom, the aftermath began. Chaos is rarely loud at first. It is quiet, sharp-edged, disbelieving. Guests whispered in tight clusters, eyes darting toward the doors as though Alara might sweep back in and declare it all a game. Someone fainted. Someone laughed hysterically. Someone demanded their carriage immediately, unwilling to be seen in the fallout. The Moreau name had been untouchable for decades. Now it tasted of blood. Adrian stood motionless, swaying slightly, his hands trembling as he ran them through his hair. His entire life, his wealth, his status, his carefully curated image, was unraveling before witnesses who would feed on the spectacle like wolves. Lucien watched him with a strange mix of pity and contempt. "You still don't understand," he said quietly. Adrian's head snapped up. "Understand what?" Lucien stepped closer, voice low enough that only he could hear. "She didn't frame you, Adrian. She freed herself." Adrian's breath hitched. "By destroying me?" Lucien shook his head. "By making sure you couldn't destroy her first." Isabel staggered forward, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her voice high with panic. "We have to go after her. We have to tell them she manipulated us, that she planned this." Lucien turned slowly, his expression turning cold. "Do you hear yourself? You think telling the police that the woman you betrayed was clever will help you?" Isabel's lip quivered. "She'll tell them everything. She'll ruin us." Lucien leaned in, eyes burning. "She already has." Before Adrian could respond, a new voice cut through the murmurs. "Mr. Moreau." A young journalist pushed through the crowd, notebook in hand, face flushed with excitement. He had been invited tonight only because his editor insisted the Moreau charity gala was society fluff. He had stumbled into history instead. "Is it true?" the reporter pressed. "That your wife has accused your family of decades of corruption? That she has provided evidence to the authorities?" Adrian swallowed hard. "She's lying." The journalist's pen scratched rapidly. Lucien watched the words forming, the legend beginning, and felt dread coil in his gut. Alara knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't simply exposing them. She was controlling the narrative. And narratives, once unleashed, were nearly impossible to kill. A clap of thunder rattled the windows. The lights flickered. Then the ballroom doors burst open again. Not with officers, but with a drenched maid, breathless and wild-eyed. "Sir!" she cried, searching for Adrian. "The vault downstairs." Adrian lunged toward her. "What about it?" The maid wrung her hands, voice breaking. "It's empty." Silence fell like a falling blade. Lucien's stomach dropped. "Not just the letters." The maid shook her head frantically. "Everything. The jewels, the bonds, the deeds. Every asset the family kept hidden." Adrian staggered backward. No, that's impossible. The vault requires 3 keys, mine, father's, and Alara's." Lucien closed his eyes, realization dawning with icy clarity. Your father gave her his key. Adrian froze. Memories crashed through him, his father's sudden fondness for Alara, their private conversations, the legal documents she had drafted for him, the quiet trust he had never granted his own son. He wouldn't, Adrian whispered. Lucien looked at him with brutal honesty. He trusted her more than he ever trusted you. Isabel grabbed Adrian's arm, voice shrill. So what now? We're ruined. You have to stop her. Adrian jerked away, eyes blazing. I will. He turned toward the doors, drenched in fury, humiliation, and something darker. Lucien stepped into his path. No. You're thinking like a wounded animal. She wants you to chase her. Adrian spat. And you want to protect her? Lucien's jaw clenched. I want to survive her. Outside, lightning flashed again. And for the briefest moment, through the rain-covered windows, Lucien saw movement at the far edge of the estate grounds. A silhouette. Umbrella. Hat. Watching. Not fleeing. Watching the house burn from afar. His blood went cold. Alara, he whispered. Because only she would have the audacity to watch the chaos she created unfold in real time. But when the lightning struck again a heartbeat later, the figure was gone. Far down the road, inside the carriage, the driver finally dared to glance toward his passenger bench. Empty. His hand shook. He had locked the trunk himself. He had driven straight from the estate. No one had exited. And yet, Alara Moreau was not inside. Only the ledger was. Lightning lit the carriage interior. On the seat lay a note in elegant handwriting. The driver's breath caught as he read. The trunk stays with you. I take the road ahead. Burn the carriage when you reach the docks. Do not look for me. The horses suddenly surged forward, as if urged by an unseen hand. The driver whipped his head toward the road. And through the sheets of rain far ahead, he saw a lone figure on horseback, cloak flying, riding toward the coast. Alara, vanishing into the storm she had summoned. Back at the manor, Lucien whispered the truth no one else yet understood. She didn't escape. His eyes burned with a mix of admiration and dread. She's going somewhere. He looked toward the dark cliffs beyond the estate. And God help whoever is waiting for her there.